So I know a lot of developers are having a hard time figuring out how to structure their solutions. And one way that I find super useful is to have solution folders and projects. So that, for example, I will have a core which has application and domain, where domain is at the very center of your solution and application is operations that you perform on the domain. And it's anything like the interfaces for repositories and its events that you would use with, for example, Mediator. And then we have infrastructure. And sometimes you would see that the infrastructure is a project by itself called infrastructure, but I like to have them as inside a solution folder, because in that way you can better separate the responsibilities. Like you have a data layer and you have an email sender and all this stuff. You would make separate projects for them. And then you have the presentation, which is anything that user will be clicking on, using, calling, and so on. And that can easily be a console app, web API, or whatever, right? And for example, here in the application, I have some interfaces like I use a repository. And the thing is that the application doesn't care about where users are coming from, which database we're using and such. It will just know that, okay, we need access to a repository, but I don't care about the implementation details. Implementation details are instead in this data layer. So here we actually have, for example, a SQL user repository that implements the iUser repository. And you will notice that this one is internal because, as I said, the application wouldn't care about the implementation of this. All we care about is that we have an iUser repository. So the way that these are wired up is in a service injector. That's just what I call it. And basically, I would just say add repositories, and we have the public interface that will be wired up, or the other way around. We have the concrete class that will be wired up to the interface. So whenever a user repository is requested, you will get SQL user repository. And this is very useful because in that way you can separate the application completely from the database logic. So for example, here in get all users, we will have a constructor that takes a dependency on the iUser repository, but as I said before, it really doesn't care about where the users are coming from at all. And the same way with the web API, we will have a controller, and here I'm just using Mediator to say like, well, get all users for me, but I really don't care how they are fetched. I just need them, and then I'll pass them on to the user of the application, right? So that's a very nice, neat, and concise way of structuring your application, and it's awesome to use these internal classes instead of having everything public, because whenever you have anything public, it means this is a free game. Anyone can use a class that is public. Anyone should be allowed to use a class that is public. But really, a lot of the time, you would only expose a subset of all the classes within a project. One good example is the DbContext. You see DbContext used in web API controllers a lot, but really you would want to encapsulate it within the project of the data layer and absolutely not use it in controller actions. Yeah, so that was about it. Feel free to use whatever structure you would like, right? But I really find this organization useful, that you have solution folders that contains the projects for that layer.